Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hey everybody, it's Jessa back for another episode of the Better Sex Podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in and listening. I'm so glad you're here. Now, I sit and record my podcast, as I have said before, in a little soundproof, air quotes, phone booth at a shared workspace because I have too much street noise at my office. And I sit in here and I record these and I have these conversations and I'm all by myself, right? And I put these out in the world. And while you are sitting there listening, I don't actually know that, right? I'm not there with you. We have no interaction, which I miss. So I want to make sure you know that I do host a monthly open Q&A webinar. And this is available to everyone that is on my mailing list. So I send a link. You can join the webinar. I do it at 2 different times, so there's a little bit of flexibility. And I'm there every month, where it's just an open conversation. You can ask me questions. It's sort of an ask me anything. I will do my best to answer. If you stump me, I promise I will try to do the research and get back to you. But that way there could be a little bit of back and forth, which I would enjoy. So I really invite you to join in. So if you're not part of my mailing list already, you can go to bettersexpodcast.com and you'll see the join the list thing right there on the website. So would love to have you there. Today's topic is about developing it's more about uncovering our sexual self. So the idea is that we are sexual creatures, sexual beings from birth until death. And it's not really defined by what we're doing, who we're having sex with, whether we are partaking in sexual behavior. It's an energy, it's a nature, it's an aspect of self that a lot of us haven't explored or don't understand. We've never sort of uncovered it and examined it. And this is something I did in my book, Sex Without Stress. The whole middle part is a sort of exploration of how our past teachings and experiences and messages and all this have informed who we are today as a sexual being in our relationship. And today I'm interviewing Melissa Fritchle, who is a therapist, but she wrote the Conscious Sexual Self Workbook. That's sort of a mouthful. Conscious Sexual Self Workbook, which is geared, solely at this sort of exploration, starting from birth, chronologically moving on into what our messages have been, what our influences are, how we have felt about ourselves as a sexual being over time. And in addition, how do we explore that with a partner? So anyway, she's my guest today. She's going to talk about that whole process of discovery, developing that workbook, what kind of difference it has made for people. And we end with a little conversation about mindfulness. So I hope you enjoy the episode. So Melissa, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk with you.
Yeah, me too. I would like to know about your workbook, sort of why you developed it, how you developed it, maybe a little tour of what's in it. I mean, that's sort of 3 different questions, I guess. But
Yes. So I wrote the Conscious Sexual Self Workbook during a time when I was teaching human sexuality courses to people who are training to be therapists. And I'd also launched my private practice as a holistic sex therapist. So what I was finding was, when I talked to people about sexuality, I was finding that they were limiting their idea of their sexuality to sexual behaviors, things they had done. So what I was hearing from people a lot were, well, I'm not a sexual person right now because I don't have a partner, or because I'm not actively sexual, or I'm celibate, either by choice or not. And one of the messages I really wanted to get across is that you are still a sexual person. Your sexuality is an energy, it's ideas, it's beliefs, it's part of you. And so I wanted to give people a way to explore that, which is really exciting for a lot of people to hear, is that, it's a part of your life from birth till death, I think. So the workbook was really designed to help people open up to these other aspects of what their sexuality might be and how it's affecting them in their daily life.
Okay, so it's distinct, right? Our sexuality as part of our self is distinct from the behavior, sexual activity we might be having with ourselves or anybody else.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And interacting, of course. Like I'm a holistic therapist. I'm a holistic thinker. So I wanted people to understand how all these things interact together. So for the example, the workbook starts at birth and your memories of early childhood and the things that you remember about just pleasure in your body, whether that was running in the sunshine as a kid or rolling in the grass, that type of relationship is a part of your sexuality as well. Different and distinct than adult sexuality, but it's part of what formed you.
Right.
As well as conversations you remember your parents having with you or your caregivers having with you about your body or your body parts or love and affection. So the workbooks opens people up to those kind of ideas about their sexuality, which I found to be really powerful. With therapists, I was really thinking it was important if you're doing work supporting other people's sexuality, that it's really important that you look at your own so you can be as clear and clean as possible. So what I was doing with people in my classes was having them journal about their own sexual beliefs and experiences and history. And people were saying how incredibly useful that was. That these were just questions that no one had ever asked them. And that they'd actually never asked themselves. We go through a lot of experiences in our lives, and a lot of times they go kind of unprocessed, unthought about. So the idea of the workbook was it's a way to slow down and kind of return to some of these memories, some of these experiences, some of these beliefs, and take a closer look at them.
All right. So what started out as part of your teaching and asking people to journal sort of evolved into a workbook with actual questions and prompts and space to reflect, it sounds like.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's journal prompts throughout, and then there's also exercises that people can do to get more information or expand their idea of their sexuality.
Now, I'm imagining, I'm trying to organize my thoughts here. Like on the one hand, so somebody that doesn't have a partner or is not sexually active right now, I can see, wow, there's all this benefit in realizing there's this whole sensual sexual part of myself that I can experience almost in my daily life.
Mm-hmm, yes.
And I'm also imagining that people with a partner, that this exploration would be helpful. Like if they're blocked or I don't even know what the language I want is around their own sexuality, it's going to have an impact on their sexual relationship.
Yes. I mean, I have lots of couples who kind of do the workbook together, and maybe they'll journal on their own and then come together and have a conversation. Or I've had some very brave couples who read the questions to each other on car rides.
Right.
And talk about them. That's quite brave. But, I think that, it opens up a conversation just about how did you become the sexual person you are, and how did you come to like the things you like, or have the limitations that you do have, because some of us, we're all going to have some boundaries and limitations that are right for us as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So these conversations, are they sort of chronological from birth through childhood, through adolescence, to adult to now, or?
Yes.
Okay.
It starts with childhood and then moves through early sexual experiences. And then the later chapters, there's a chapter on your different identities that you play in your life and how that interacts with your sexuality. So gender identities are one of those categories, but also religious or spiritual identities might be part of it, or roles that you play. So being a parent, being a daughter, being a particular racial identity or cultural identity, how those things might be interacting in what you believe about your sexuality or what you believe you should be doing or should be feeling. And so there's a whole chapter on that, which can be really useful for people. Mm-hmm. There's a chapter on partnership, just what changes for you when you're trying to be sexual with another person.
Yeah.
And, what your values might be about that, what your intentions might be in being with a partner, what, missteps you might have made in the past that you want to forgive yourself for. So,
yeah. So until people had your workbook, where do you think they looked for answers? I mean, for those people that were even asking the questions or thinking that there were questions to ask,
Yes, I know. It's kind of amazing. I think that you're right on in that to a large degree, we sort of have this model where by junior high age or adolescence, we're supposed to have all the answers.
Yeah.
And it's now embarrassing to ask questions.
Right.
And I mean, I remember that for myself. I remember laughing at dirty jokes that I didn't get and just kind of going along because I was too embarrassed to say, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
And so it really limits us. I think that's a huge, huge limit to our own self-exploration and sexual communication. So on one level, you're right. We're not even asking the questions.
Right.
On another level, I think we're looking for answers to places like Cosmo magazine or Playboy or
pornography. Yeah.
Right. Hopefully some good podcasts, like this one. I think it's getting better what's out there, but people are having to sift through so much material. I mean, I don't know about you, but I know for me, when I try to do internet research on sexual issues, I just have to, yeah. It's pretty overwhelming. It's pretty demoralizing of sort of the bad material that's out there. And I
mean, on the pro side, right, there's a lot out there. And on the bad side is, you got to sift through and figure out what's legitimate or what's helpful or what's informed,
Yeah. And that sifting process is really hard. And so I think when we're looking to information out there, even the good information, what you're really finding is sort of what worked for other people.
Yeah.
And that can be helpful because you can sit and say, does this resonate with me? Do I like this? But it can also be not helpful because I think everyone's sexuality is so unique. And so the answers that worked for me, or the answers that worked for your next door neighbor, or the answers that worked for that particular blogger or journalist may not work for you.
Yeah.
And my concern is always that people take these things in and think now it becomes another thing they think they should be doing or should be feeling.
Yeah, I mean, the point you made before too about we feel like we should have the answers by junior high or maybe high school. I mean, I'm thinking about clients in my practice sometimes who come in. I mean, they're adults, 30s, 40s. I mean, however old they are, and it's like they've passed the window where they could have asked questions a long time ago. So now they're stuck with this lack of knowledge. Right. And lack of experience, and they feel super self-conscious. And of course, it's in the way of their sex life. But it's like there was a time when we could have asked that, and now it's too late.
Yeah.
And I love that you're framing this as, no, it isn't too late. Let's have these conversations.
Right. It absolutely isn't. And even if you did get a bunch of really great information when you were 21, say, and you were able to explore and you're able to do these things, that the fact is your body at 30 is going to need different things altogether.
Yes. Yeah. Right. It's a constantly evolving landscape.
Right. And the other thing that I think is a problem with a lot of the sexual advice out there is it will tell you, like, here's a way to please your lover, as though all of your lovers are going to like the same thing.
Right. Yeah. This is what I tell clients all the time. You've got to figure out, not only do you have a different lover now than you had before, but that lover's different than yesterday, right? Like our bodies are always changing and our context is changing.
And so it can be good to go out and get, inspiration or ideas. But I think what I always want to return people to is the more important skill set in getting information is being able to listen to your own body and your own mind and see, does this resonate? Do I like this? Does this feel good for me? And then secondarily, to be able to communicate to a partner. So maybe you got an idea about what, 50 ways to please your lover, but you're going to, when you try them out with your partner, you still have to communicate with them.
Yeah.
So
is this why it's so confusing to figure out what we want? I mean, or is there more that you'd say about that?
I think so. I mean, I think that it's confusing to figure out what we want because sex is so loaded in our culture and it's been so shame-based. And so when we hear that this is what someone should want, or this is what the majority of people want, then we automatically feel like we're supposed to be that way too.
Yeah.
And shame is it just stops our ability to process and be curious. So I feel like the more we can help people reduce their own shame and to realize that they're going to be totally unique and they're going to get to discover all kinds of things about themselves, and it's okay. And they can decide how they act and what their ethics and values are, but they can also just receive information from themselves, and that's all okay. Then that opens up, a more expansive ability to figure out what you want.
Yeah. And then, like you were saying, there's this other level of, there's what I want, there's what you want. How are we going to do something together?
Yes.
Right.
That bridge. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. What overlaps, what doesn't, what's possible, what needs to come off the table. I mean, like we each have to individually understand our sexuality and our preferences and desires. And then we have to collaborate with our partner. Yeah.
And I think figuring out what you want is so critical because, a lot of times there are things in sexuality that feel awkward or uncomfortable. And, if you have a model, again, that looks at the media and like sex scenes that you see on TV or sex scenes that you see in porn, there's no representation of awkwardness.
Yeah.
Or just like discomfort or doubt or questioning. And that is a part of a curious, explorative sexuality. But to be safe for ourselves, we also have to differentiate between what might be an edge and some discomfort versus a boundary and actual no,
right.
A fear or this is not okay.
Yeah, I describe this to people too. It's like we have to earn comfort with things. Like everything's uncomfortable the first time we do it. French kissing, or if we think back, right?
Right.
You have to have enough experience of something that it becomes comfortable.
Yes.
So it's not like we go off and do this stuff and it's like easy right away. I mean, at least you can't count on that.
Right.
And it's so valuable what you're pointing out too. What's the difference between that discomfort that we should expect and work through and wait, no, this is a no. Yeah.
I talk to clients a lot about figuring out how their internal sense of the difference between an edge, which to me is a place where you feel a little risky, you're a little bit scared, but in that good, excited way, versus a boundary where you feel like you're checking out or you're not in integrity with yourself or you're actually fearful. And that's so important.
So how do you teach people to tell the difference between those two things?
I mean, I might do work with someone around remembering a time when they were in different states, a state of excitement, and you can move it outside of the sexual realm for people to get a sense. Like, think about a time when you were excited to go give a speech or talk in public, if they ever had that, or, something where they sort of challenged themselves and they were a little nervous and they were on an edge for themselves. And what did that feel like in their body?
Okay.
Versus a time when they crossed a boundary of their own, right? And how that felt in their body when they knew, like, I'm doing this thing, but I don't really feel great about it. And I should step back. And I would explore it outside of a sexual memory first.
Yeah.
Because those other arenas can be safer. So one is to get that felt somatic sense. Well, how does your body tell you that you're excited or you're scared? Or, what are those different feeling states? You're on an edge, you're at a boundary.
Yeah.
And then I would talk about the shame voices that come in, because sometimes we think something is a no because we think we shouldn't do it. And that's a little bit more of an intellectual process sometimes of sorting through.
Yeah.
Like, is this your own value? Is this a cultural value that you inherited that maybe isn't actually relevant to you now?
Right. It's like, whose boundary is it? Right?
Yes.
Is it really yours, or is it your trainings, or the messages you get from other people?
Right.
Yeah.
So the workbook helps people work through those kind of things as well, sort of shaking off other people's stories, other people's values, so that you can find your own.
It's Jessa here, just taking a quick break. Thanks for listening. Are you interested in being a guest on the show? I'm always looking for people with expertise to share that could enrich other people's sex lives. And I'm also interested in hearing from people who have transformed their own intimate relationship and would want to share their story with my listeners. So if you've got something to contribute to the discussion and want to see about being featured on an upcoming episode, please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, and check out the Be a Guest details. You'll find everything you need there. right. So what do people who have done the workbook, I mean, it sounds like you're using this with your own clients in private practice.
Yes.
But then I imagine other people are just, using it alone too. But what do you hear from people? What changes? What do people report that have gone through this process?
I hear a lot of reduced shame. And just there's a feeling of being witnessed, even though you might be doing it completely on your own, that you have this other voice that's talking you through it, and the fact that someone is asking these questions lets you feel like it's okay to explore them, that it's valuable and worthy to do so, and that your sexuality is important. So I hear that from people a lot. I hear a lot of increased self-compassion and compassion for partners. As people realize how complicated our sexuality is, it's been so impacted by all these different areas of our lives, and it's so intertwined with what we're doing and changing. And so people get a lot more self-compassion and compassion for others through doing the process, for sure.
I'm imagining people would also report letting go of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's related to reducing shame, but I'm thinking specifically about maybe they don't judge each other's desires as much, because I think there can be a tendency, what I want's okay, but what you want is weird.
Right.
Instead to realize, oh, wait, this is all within the realm of human experience, and we may have to collaborate or navigate how we're going to put these things together, but we don't have to pathologize each other either.
Right, exactly. I think people talk about feeling more freedom, that all of a sudden the box got bigger, Yeah. If there's still a box at all. I mean, I think, we have to develop our own map for what works and what's okay. But there is a way in which, as working through this, you realize, there isn't some right way to be. And how much we are taught that story kind of unconsciously, that there's a right way to be.
Yeah. So what, how do you suggest people talk about these wants and desires and what they're learning, if they get this freedom and they get this lack of shame and acceptance through the process, how do they start to talk to their partner about it? How do they navigate what they each want and need?
I think that, one of the things I find really helpful is to start from a place of that it's okay to just talk about something without making a request to act on it yet. Mm-hmm. A lot of people think, like, if I bring up something I'm thinking about sexually or a sexual desire I have, then it means that I'm saying we must act on this, or it's only worthy to bring up if it's a need,
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to first start from a place of it's okay to just talk about what ifs and things you're wondering about or things you're curious about, without having to start a conversation about whether you're going to act on it yet or not. Mm-hmm. That those are different things.
Good advice.
And you can have a sexual fantasy that you might never want to make real in the world, but is nice to have witnessed or to share with a partner or to talk about or think about.
Yeah.
And so I really encourage people to be clear at which point in the conversation they want to be. It's okay to say, I just want to talk to you about this sexual fantasy that's like intriguing to me, but I'm not asking to do anything. I'm not asking to act on it. Something about this really turns me on. And I think that's really useful.
Yeah.
The other piece that I think to deepen that conversation, and this is something you can do with yourself first before talking with a partner, or it's something you and your partner can do together, is to think about what is it about this thing that turns you on. We often don't go to that next step of the conversation. Somebody might say, I have a fantasy about having sex at work, for example.
Right.
And that might not be a safe fantasy to enact.
Right.
Might be great. But if you have a conversation about like what turns you on about that, like what do you imagine you'd be feeling, like when you think about it, what works, and maybe the person would say, like, I feel naughty, I feel this risk of being caught, but I also feel like I'm in an empowered place, or whatever it might be for them. It's a completely different thing.
Right.
Then you can grab onto those things. Those things are much more, easy for a partner to understand. right? Like, oh, I understand wanting to take a little risk. I understand wanting to feel like powerful or naughty. So there's an easier bridge sometimes for people. And two, it makes it more doable to say like, well, we could create some way to bring those feelings in. It might not be having sex at work, but let's think about other ways that we could, create a scenario where you get to feel like that.
Right. What's striking me as we talk is how much I'm doing all the same things in my practice with somewhat different framing or language, but we're totally on the same page.
Yeah, good. So, yeah.
Yeah, this idea of exploring eroticism. What's erotic to each person and how might we harness that energy, right? There's so much fuel in it.
Yes.
So there's so much benefit in exploring what we find erotic and then figuring out how we're going to share that with our partner. And then what do we want to do, if anything?
Right.
With that material.
Yeah. And it comes back to this, as we talked about in the beginning, pulling away from this idea that it's about behaviors or, a set be like do A, then do B, then do
C. Right.
It's more about how do you want to feel when you're sexual? Yeah. What moods and emotions like turn you on? What thought processes turn you on? Those things open up so much more possibility than I want to, use this sex toy in this particular way. Those things are good too. And in the moment, you need to have that kind of communication, to be able to say, I want you to put that here. I want you to go faster or slower, those kind of things. But to also be able to talk about mood.
Yeah, and energy and power and all those things. Yeah.
Yes. It's much more engaging and creative to be able to share with someone that way. And then you can co-create things. I do think on the basis of how to communicate desire with a partner, it is important to have shared language that you feel comfortable with. So can you talk about your genitals and, different parts of your body? Do you have words for them that feel comfortable for both of you?
Is that part of the workbook that you discuss, or do you have tools or ideas for how people develop that language?
We talk in the workbook a little bit about, what words and language have been used for your genitals in the past and what would you prefer? There's so many options out there, and coming up with a shorthand with a partner is important. I talk about that in my therapy practice more, is because sometimes people are using language that actually turns their partner off.
Right.
And they don't realize it. It's just the language that they have. So coming up with shared language that feels comfortable to both people and talking about particular body parts or particular acts that they want to do is really important.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think, being able to say something from the positive, that's a general communication thing. But a lot of times people wait until they're frustrated before they share a desire. And so they come at it from this negative, right? Like, I wish you wouldn't do this, or why haven't you ever, or blah, 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 which doesn't hit well.
Right. That doesn't set that conversation up to be that productive. Right.
No. And, so I think about helping people to focus on what excites you, what do you want, so that you can come at it from a request, from a place of excitement and positive feedback in some ways, in preference to negative feedback.
Yeah, it's like, I want our relationship to be as strong as it can be. That's why I want to talk about this, so we can have the best sex life that we can enjoy together.
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the techniques I like a lot that I think is really great, because there's a way of joining. Like sometimes also when we talk about our sexual desires, they can feel like they're just coming from us. And it's just that this is what I need and you have to meet me there. And it can kind of put your partner off or intimidate them or, make them feel pressured. And so one of the techniques I like is to say, I would like to do XYZ if that was exciting to you.
Yeah.
I would like to do this if that turned you on. And just that little bit of invitation at the end of bridging to the partner, of acknowledging, I'm asking for something in partnership. I'm not asking for this as a standalone thing. I'm saying, I want you to do it with me if you want to do it in partnership.
Yeah. And I would imagine it's powerful to say, and I would like to hear what you want to do.
Yes.
I really want to, be considering the things that you desire too.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And so I think those little ways of bridging when you're talking to a partner can make a huge, huge difference. And they can be quite simple. in the way you bring them into the conversation, but they just really make a difference in how it's received and in softening the way you talk. So it doesn't feel like pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to ask you about mindfulness, which is, sort of a separate topic, but also totally related to sex,
Yeah.
I think, but you are a mindfulness meditation teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yes.
How do you see mindfulness and sex coming together? I mean, maybe it's as obvious to the listeners as it seems to be to me, but maybe not. So.
I think it isn't to a lot of people. I mean, I think that, when people think about sex, they think about something that they perform and that they do. And so mindfulness is sort of like you can go to yoga class, for example, and just like blast through the poses and be doing them all right and be getting a workout and whatnot. But that's not the same as going to yoga and slowing down enough to really feel what's happening in your body, to be taking in the energy of your own limitations, your own stretch, your own edges. And so sex is the same way, of course. Like you can have sex in a completely non-mindful way.
Yeah.
In a performance-oriented way. But I believe that coming to sex, being mindful, being able to be present and slow down and in your body so that you're really experiencing it is the number one way to have better sex, right? For people. And it requires slowing down and it requires a more subtlety, which is hard for all of us. It's hard in the real world, much less in sex. And so what I hear from clients a lot is they're saying, well, yeah, I'm having sex and I'm not enjoying it. And I talk about, well, what's on your mind when you're having sex? And they're thinking, oh, well, I'm thinking about the dishes in the sink and what I have to do tomorrow. And I'm thinking about, these other things. And I'm wondering if the kids are going to knock on the door or if they're really asleep yet. And, and I hear that from a lot of people.
Right. I do too.
Yeah.
And it's like, of course you're not enjoying sex.
Right. Yes.
You're really there. Yeah.
You're not really there. And so mindfulness practice is, there's ways that you can practice it just during sex and sort of how do you slow down? How do you prepare yourself to be present? And since I'm also a mindfulness meditation teacher, a lot of my clients, I suggest doing practice when they're not being sexual. So having time in the day where you focus on being present, on feeling your body, on letting those other thoughts and concerns go away for a little while.
Would you say that your workbook brings in any mindfulness or somehow facilitates mindfulness because of the introspection of it at all, or are they sort of two different kind of tools?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I wasn't a mindfulness teacher at that time, although the graduate program I went through at John F. Kennedy University definitely had mindfulness and Buddhist psychology as a part of it. So I've held that stance for quite some time. But I would say anytime that you are sitting and really listening to your own internal voice, to some degree that can be mindful.
Yeah.
If you're focusing on something in particular. So the journaling process can be very mindful for people if it's engaging enough to them and they're really drawn into just doing that for themselves in the moment and paying attention to themselves in the moment.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. So I would love for you to tell people where they can get this workbook, and is there anything else that you want to promote or let people know about how they could reach you or follow you?
Yeah. So the workbook, it's the Conscious Sexual Self Workbook, and it's available on Amazon, which is the easiest and quickest way to get it currently. Right. Get it in 2 days, which is great. And you can follow me on my website. It's mf-therapy.com. I host a blog there that I write called Transformational Pleasure, which is the focus right now is on how pleasure is healing to us and transforming to us and a really important part of living a healthy, full life. So you can read the blog there. And Conscious Sexual Self also has a Facebook page and a Facebook community, so you can follow that and see what's going on there. So
wonderful. Let's put links to all these things in the show notes so people can easily access all that.
Great. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being with me.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get-to-know-you and question-and-answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.